the Grays. That's kind of weird.
Misty and Dan.
And Misty and Dan, huh? Misty and Dan too.
Yeah, we're.
Well, the kids are out of school, right?
Yep.
Maybe.
Yeah, but that's not Misty and Dan either. Sure if they're okay. Or maybe they quit last week. And you guys are the diehards.
Well, I'm gonna tell them on them because I ran into them Sunday afternoon.
Which, them,
No,
or who are you
Monday
telling
af-
on?
the
Them?
first.
Okay.
I ran into him, I'm sorry, it was Monday evening, and, Misty said, I thought it was done last week, and Dad and I were like, no, that's next week's last one, so they knew.
So okay, so, yeah, she's not off the hook.
You can look into the camera right now. Say what you want to say, Jim.
Yeah, right.
You would just edit that out.
Okay, so, this is something I've always wanted to do, Donnie helped me get it together like this, and it's something that you could read through, it'd be pretty easy to do on your own time, and, Joe thinks it's his summer reading program. So, but you can, so the history is in, the scriptures are in italics and the history is in regular, writing there, and so you can read through that and you can, read through it pretty easily and know all of the events that took place, and there's more, obviously there's more, but these are this kind of the highlight events if you want to, and it'll be a little easier to follow because we actually put the king's names in there, and so it could be a little interesting summer reading project if you need to, Joe. Okay, so what I'd like to do, let's go to chapter 10, and let's look at verse 1, and would somebody read that? Daniel chapter 10, verse 1.
In the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was great. That was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision.
Okay, so this vision, and we got a taste of that last week, that it was just conflict, it's just war. And if you read through that with this, and we're gonna go ahead and pick up here in just a second on some more verses and move forward, but I would like to read Daniel 8, and I'd like to read 17 and 19. And before we read those, I just want to remind you, and it's on the chart, so if you look at Daniel 8, that was the ram and the goat, and the ram was represented the Medes and the Persians, and the goat represented Greece. And so it's interesting though, in here he makes a point, okay? And let's read chapter 8, verses 17, 18, and 19. And this is where Daniel's talking to Gabriel, and he's getting some information. And what does it say?
As I came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand that the vision concerns the time of the end. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep, with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet. He said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end.
Okay, so if we know, because the text tells us this is about the Medes and the Persians, and we know it's about Greece because the text tells us that, okay? So but here, when he's being told about the vision, those verses imply something. What does it imply?
Second coming?
Well, he's certainly, if he's not saying, he's projecting, right? What are the projection words into the future that he's, granted, this is still future for Daniel, it's a couple, 200 years ahead of where he is.
Oh.
Saying it's for the future, for the end of time.
Yeah, and so he's intentionally using those words, and I want you to know that it's the final period of the indignation. So there's something in Greece that relates to the final period of the indignation. Okay, so turn with me to Daniel chapter 11. We finished.
I have a question.
Yes, sure, Joe.
So is he talking about in this, as far as the end of time or whatever, is he talking about the end of their period before Jesus comes?
Before
or
his
is-
second coming?
No, before the
First
first one? Or is he projecting all the way through all that, even though Christ hasn't come during this time, all the way through to the second coming?
Yeah, he's really projecting past because he says the final period of indignation. So he's
The
pinpointing the right before Jesus returns. And he's-
finale?
Yes, he's making that point, even though, and why would he make that point with Greece? And today's lesson is gonna show us why he would make that projection when he's talking about Greece, okay? So we went through 20, and here, again, you can read through it, it's much more readable, you can sit down and read through that history and understand it, and we're gonna jump to verse 21, and we'll just kind of read the verses as they're broken out on our page. So if somebody would read 11:21, we'll pick up there. So, and let me just say this, it's about 130 years, 150 years since Greece conquered the Medes and the Persians. That's how deep we are into the Greek era, okay? And so it's almost, and we're gonna see that today, we're seeing Rome start to rise, okay? So, and again, it does fit with why in chapter 2 did we say that the statue represented these 4 countries? And why did we say those beasts were these 4 countries? Part of it is the fulfillment, but part of it is also, it speaks to all 4 of those countries in this book, okay? And we're gonna see that more today. So if somebody would read Daniel 11:21.
In his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries.
Okay, so what does that sound like?
It's like, not royal,
Okay,
not a royal person.
okay, so that tells us he's gonna get the throne, but it's not, it wouldn't be his normally.
Yeah.
Okay, alright, and so, and what else are we hearing about him?
Just pops up.
He's sneaky, apparently.
Okay,
By
he's
in-
sneaky.
By intrigue.
Yep, and that's important because is that how you spell sneaky? I haven't spelled that word in forever. Okay, so we do find that he's sneaky and he's not supposed to get the throne. So in succession, we come to Antiochus IV Epiphanes, okay? He ruled from 175 to 164 BC. He was not the rightful heir to the throne. And he seized the throne when the real heir was being held hostage in Rome. And of course, he was sneaky about the way that he did it. And he also says that this was a time there was like false security. People were feeling like, okay, we can let our guard down, okay, when he came on the scene. So let's read 11:22. And I'm going to tell you the next 15 verses are all going to be about Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Hey, how are you? So let's turn to Daniel 11:22, and let's find out more about Antiochus Epiphanes IV.
Then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him, both in and a prince of a covenant will be destroyed. Both it and a prince of a covenant will be destroyed.
Okay, so it sounds like in battle, it sounds like he's what?
Pretty good.
He's good, he's able to conquer other countries, okay? He's winning in battle, okay? And largely what we see up till verse 20 is, what we see up till verse 20 is, that Egypt and Syria have been fighting back and forth and back and forth. So every time they do, we talked about last week, they go through Israel. Okay. Every time they do, they go through Israel, and So that's what transpires there. Okay, so he conquers, and what else does it say about him? What else is described about him? We're in, 11:22. Yeah,
It's the prince of the
he mentions the Prince of the Covenant,
No,
and the Prince of the Covenant was actually the high priest. And his name was, is it spelled,
Onias,
okay, how do I spell?
O-N-I-A-S.
O-N-I-A-S, he killed him, he murdered him, the high priest. And we're gonna see, as we discover more things about him, his real hatred for the Jews is gonna come out more until it reaches its pivot, it's a huge moment there. So let's read Daniel 11:23. What do we find out about him in Daniel 11:23?
After coming to an agreement with him, he will act deceitfully, and with only a few people, he will rise to power.
Okay, so how is he described here?
He's still sneaky.
He's still sneaky. Now I know how to spell it. And what else do we find about him?
Like he doesn't need a lot of help.
Okay,
I mean, it says
he's strong.
it
He
says
will.
only he will rise to power with only a few people.
Okay. And one thing that we're gonna see in just a minute as we introduce these characters, he's going to attack Egypt again. Those are his relatives. Okay? Remember when Cleopatra, we haven't got to that part, so let's just wait, okay? But there's also, remember there was a marriage that we talked about last week? There's actually 2 marriages, and so these people are related to each other. And as they fight, it's like Dan said, it really is the Hatfields and the McCoys, because they're uncle and nephews. Antiochus is gonna be the uncle to the nephews who are in control of Egypt. So, so Antiochus IV came to Egypt with a small army, and then he launched a preemptive strike against his nephew Ptolemy VI, and he captured him. And so then after he captured Ptolemy VI, then he left the city of Alexandria, and Alexandria said, we don't want Ptolemy VI to be our king, and we're gonna vote for his brother. We want his brother, which is Ptolemy VIII. We want him to be our king, and so instead of the 2 of them battling it out to see who's gonna control Egypt, they decide to join forces and control Egypt together against Antiochus. So that's what happened in history. Let's look at Daniel 11:24.
This is when the richest provinces feel secure, he will invade them and will achieve what neither his fathers nor his forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. He will plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time.
Okay, so what does that sound like?
He's enjoying the spoils.
Okay, yep, so he's got some money from when he conquers, and what does he do with that money?
He's like paying people off.
He's paying people off. And that's exactly what he did, and so he used what he gained from his conquests, and he gave bribes to people to influence their decision making and to cooperate with him. So let's look at Daniel 11:25. And all of this is kinda, we're actually leading up to why he was called a despicable person, okay? So what does Daniel 11:25 say about him?
And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for plots shall be devised against him.
Okay, so he, Antiochus IV, going against who?
Ptolemy the Eighth.
It should probably be both of them together. And who wins in the battle?
The bad guy.
The bad guy. Yep. And it actually, if you look at the history, it says that he marched against Ptolemy the Sixth Army. He reached as far as the Nile, the Delta Nile, or the Nile Delta, before they even realized they were in Egypt. So he's already knocking on their door, and he, from there, he had conquered several Egyptian cities, and then he influenced some of the Egyptians, acted like he was their ally, and he declared himself king over Egypt, except the city of Alexandria. So now he's got like Syria to the north and most of Egypt under his power. And they did have negotiations. Remember, he's talking to family, and they lied to each other, and nobody planned on keeping the agreement. So what does Daniel 11:26 say?
Those who eat from the king's provisions will try to destroy him. His army will be swept away, and many will fall in battle.
Okay, so what would we expect? What can we understand that potentially is going on?
Somebody will betray him.
Yeah, that's exactly what's gonna happen. So he was so deceptive that even at the highest level of government for Ptolemy the Sixth, he was influencing them, bribing them, and so he was corrupting the highest levels of government. So he's working from the inside as well as coming up against them with his army. Okay, how about 27?
Seeking nothing but each other's harm, these kings will plot against each other at the conference table, attempting to deceive each other, but it will make no difference, for the end will come at this appointed time.
Okay, what does that sound like?
Mostly that they wasted a lot of time.
Well, that is true.
Because it didn't matter anyway.
Yeah, and actually they're meeting at a conference table, they're trying to come to some sort of peace agreement, they're trying to, figure something out so they quit fighting, because that's all they're doing is fighting with each other. And Ptolemy's losing, up to now, okay? And so, and they make their agreements, but they don't keep them. And again, it's uncle and nephew sitting down at the table trying to come to an agreement, and neither one of them keep whatever agreements they come to. Okay, so, and then there's a point at, what's that statement at the end of verse 27?
And will still come at the appointed time.
Yeah, and what does that tell us as we read this?
God's in control.
Yeah, God's in control. God's in control. Okay, let's look at 11:28. I think if we looked at the history, we'd find there was kind of a split between the two brothers, and then they come back together. But because it wasn't talked about in Daniel, didn't go down that road. But we're gonna see what they do when they come back together here shortly. But what does 11:28 say?
And he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. He shall work his will and return to his own land.
Okay, so Antiochus leaves Egypt. He leaves Egypt, and what does he do? What does it sound like? He'll return to his land, but what does it say?
All that work and you left off that.
Well, it's set against the Holy Covenant, so it's.
Thank you. So it's set, you said it, so what does that tell us? When it says you set against the Holy Covenant, what is it implying to us?
It's gonna march on Jerusalem.
Yep, and so this is where his, Jerusalem, this is where it starts to show his, hatred for the Jews. And he actually does march on Jerusalem, and he kills a bunch of people, and he sacked the city, so he keeps on plundering and taking the money home, and he sacked the city and killed people. So let's read 11:29.
At the appointed time, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. And then,
Yeah, 32, please, sorry.
ships of the western coastlands will oppose him, and he will lose heart. Then he will turn back and vent his fury against the Holy Covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the Holy Covenant.
Okay, so here, he's going after, Antiochus goes going after Egypt again, okay? He's going after the brothers, and the brothers decide, so what does it say? Who do we think is gonna win? Based on what the Bible tells us, what, was read.
The brothers.
Egypt.
Yeah, it's not-
Antiochus like sees the ships and he's like, never mind.
Well, you're kinda right, but what happens, it is the brothers, but it's because, and I forgot my question. Laura, it's your chance to give me my question. Lauren. It says, what does it say, but this time, what does the scripture say? But this time,
It'd be different.
it's gonna be different, so we know he conquered before, now we're gonna find out it's not gonna be as easy for him, okay? And what happens that becomes an issue for him? What's described there?
Mine says the ships of Kittim,
Uh-huh.
didn't somebody said it was the ships of the west,
The western coastlands is what.
Okay, so is it I am?
west of Greece, maybe.
Okay, is it I am?
AM,
Thank you.
no, it is I am, sorry.
You're just trying to give us another bone, aren't you? I don't need any help with that. Okay, so this is, anybody know who the ships of Kittim is referring to?
Cyprus.
Yeah, it's
The
Rome.
Romans, the
Yeah.
Romans coming out of Cyprus.
Yeah, so they're becoming a power in the world, and while these guys are duking it out, the boys go to Rome and say, fight with us. And so when he comes down to fight them, Rome's right there with them. So he's gotta fight Egypt and Rome or go home. And he decides to go home, okay? But on the way, what does it say?
Went back, tore up Jerusalem.
Went back.
Vented his fury against the Holy Covenant.
Yeah, so he's mad. He got turned back, he's mad, and he's gonna take it out on, we know by the Holy Covenant, he's referencing Israel. Okay, so, is it just 31 now?
Yes.
Okay, can somebody read that?
His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. And they will set up the abomination that causes desolation.
Okay, what does he do?
Stop the sacrifices at the temple.
Stops temple sacrifice. What else does it say?
Sets up the abomination.
Abomination of desolation. Does that sound familiar to you?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
It's the same words used
Revelation.
in Revelations about talking about the Antichrist.
Okay, how about Matthew?
Or that one.
Would that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Or in Daniel 9.
Yeah.
Okay, so
When you see
Jesus
that-
said that, yeah, so Jesus said in Matthew 24:15, the abomination of desolation, when you see that, in the holy place. So this sounds very similar, right, to what Jesus said was gonna be a future event in his death. And so what did he do? He placed guards around the temple. He made them worship idols. He set up Zeus in the temple on the altar, the Holy of Holies. He sacrificed a pig on the altar, made the priests eat it. If they practiced any of their Jewish practices like circumcision, they killed the baby and hung the baby around the mother's neck. He stopped everything. So that's exactly what he did. And then anybody that was on the last one, but he rewarded anybody that took his side. So he's gonna come down on them hard. Those that are gonna stay with him, we're gonna see more of that play out here in just a second. But that's what he did out, and that was his reaction to being turned back by Rome and Egypt. Okay?
Like a little spoiled kid. isn't he?
Exactly. Right? Okay.
Taking his frustration out on somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what he did. Okay, so look at Daniel 11:32. Let's read that.
With flattery he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant, but the people who know their God will firmly resist him.
So here, he's actually putting, what is he doing with people in this verse?
Bribe them.
Okay, it could definitely be bribery, but as Daniel's writing it, what is he doing? I didn't ask that question very well. What is he doing with people in this verse?
Influencing,
Okay, he is influencing them.
Pitting them against each other?
Yeah, he's really describing two different groups of people. And the Jews are going to end up in one of these two categories of people. One category is going to be what? One category of people is going to
violate the covenant.
Yep. So they're going to side with Antiochus. They're going to side with him. They're going to support him. They're going to turn their back on their Jewish faith, religion, whatever. And then some of them are going to be what? Yep. Some of them are going to be faithful. Now, we don't have the Apocrypha in our Bible, but there's some books in there called the Maccabees. It actually has history of this time frame, and it's a particular family that rose up during this time frame, and they were the ones that started to lead a revolt against Antiochus IV, okay? So it says the Maccabees was really the head of the group that started to lead a revolt against Antiochus and what he was doing. So what does Daniel 11:33 tell us?
Those who are wise will instruct many, though for a time they will fall by the sword or be burned or captured or plundered.
Okay, so what does that sound like? What are the wise gonna do? What?
they're being punished for their faith.
Yeah, they're definitely gonna be punished, so there's a lot of persecution for those that remain faithful to God. Okay, what else do we find?
They instruct many, so they're still reaching a lot of people.
Okay, so there's gonna be some people who know exactly what is going on, and that what they're gonna do is encourage others to stay true to their faith. So that's the environment all of this is taking place in. Okay, let's read 34 and 35.
During these persecutions, little help will arrive, and many who join them will not be sincere.
Go ahead. No, you're fine.
And some of the wise will fall victim to persecution. In this way, they will be refined and cleansed and made pure until the time of the end, for the appointed time is still to come.
Okay, again, these several times in here, we're seeing the appointed time being described, and God is making it very clear to us, the readers, that He's in charge of the events that are going on this earth. And in this last little bit about here, what do we find out? Some people are going to do what? And again, we're kind of getting people categorized a little bit here. Some people are going to do what? Some are going to stumble, okay? What else?
Many won't have, I mean, it talks about not being sincere, or maybe being really faithful.
Okay. So we're going to find some who are faithful, and those who are faithful are going to do what?
The ones that are faithful are gonna be purified and made spotless
Yep.
until the end of time.
Yep. So that tells us that there's still this purifying work, that God's also using the suffering that they're going through to purify them and purify their faith. And that's a hard thing. And it's a hard thing to understand, God using our suffering to strengthen and purify us as a person in our faith. But He talks about it throughout the Bible. And He's talking about it here in connection with His people. So the faithful are going to be purified. And what else do we see? So they're going to get what? What are they going to get? And that's back in 34.
A little help.
A little help. So slowly some Jews start to help the Maccabee family to rebel against Antiochus IV. Okay? He also talks about the suffering and the purging. How long is it going to continue?
Till the appointed time of the end.
To the appointed time of the end. Okay. So if we can match, and you'll get a chance to read it, and it's in better format here than just in talking about it last week. We can match all of that up against history from the 330s basically to 164, and have those hundreds of years of history, which include marriages and fights and details about negotiations that don't work, and then Antiochus doing his thing in the temple and persecuting the Jews, all the way through that chapter. And we see God's control over those events. What stands out to you as we think about that?
God is faithful.
Pardon?
God is faithful.
Okay, God's faithfulness. And specifically, He's faithful to what?
Israel.
Yep. And what else?
His covenant.
Okay, and I'll put that here. But also to His what?
Word.
Yep. He's faithful to His word. He's faithful to His word. If we, so when you go to, you get to verse 36 of chapter 11, and we'll read through the rest of this, but it's important to know there are almost not any scholars. It's very unusual for any scholars to not think, okay, we match this up to history to verse 35, 36 to the end of the chapter, 45. Can't match it up. It doesn't match. And so when they get to this point and they'll look at these verses, and now remember what we read in chapter 8, verses 17 through 19. Chapter 8 talked about the Medes and the Persians, and we just started this lesson reading 8, 17, and 19. And what did it say? If we need to go back there, let's jump back there. It's only a page What does 8, 17, and 19 tell us?
The end of time?
Yes. He is saying there is a person in history who's gonna look so much like a person in the future, yet future in our day, in our time, that Jesus said in Matthew 24, when you see him standing in the holy place, get out of Dodge. Okay? And he's telling us to think ahead to the end, to the final period, which 19 calls it the final period of indignation. So that's intentional to get us to think beyond this guy and to understand this guy. What do we call that? When something looks like something that's going to be future, there's a word for it. Do you know what that word is?
I can't remember.
It's called a foreshadow. So, somebody that comes before, looks a lot like, but it's not him, he's not the really, really bad guy, whatever he did was bad, but the really, really bad guy looks like that, but he's so much worse, and he's still coming. Okay? By the way, I think I mentioned this when we went through chapter 8, but eventually Antiochus leaves, and they do raise an army, and they do combat him. They eventually recover the temple, and they clean it all up, and Hanukkah is a celebration of cleaning up the temple after Antiochus Epiphanes destroyed the temple. Okay? Alright, so 1136 through 45, there's no historical fulfillment for those verses. But before we go to those verses, I want to go back and I want to look at 9:24 through 27. I want to put that up here again on the board, and I want to make a point just for review as well as to make a point, and we'll do it as quickly as we can because we have business to take care of to be done. Okay, so let me see, let's test your memories. Okay, this was a covenant, and there's a covenant. We have 490 total years. Remember in chapter 9 that Daniel was asking about his people, the time frame for his people to turn in their relationship to God. And Gabriel told him, there's 490 years for your city and for your people to turn back to God. And he gives him a list of 6 things, which will basically mean everything is done on earth and the people are turned back to God. We said that starts, that there's a time clock, and we're given some information, some pieces, and if you can help me or if I can help you, we'll go through this and what started those 490 years. Does anybody remember?
Was Cyrus saying to rebuild Jerusalem?
That's close. So it was Artaxerxes, but he is a Persian, and it's in Nehemiah 2, and it is March 15th, 445 BC, and it is to go back and rebuild what?
Temple.
Not the temple. The city. It was
Oh,
Jerusalem.
okay.
This is the only,
Yeah.
this is the only decree for Jerusalem. There were 3 for the temple in Ezra, and this is the only one for the city. And they had to do that because they weren't able to complete the rebuild of the temple because they kept getting harassed by their enemies. And so in order to get the protection around the temple area, they had to build the temple with the moat and everything else to be able to complete that building. So we're told that so he divides that into 49 years. So by that point in time, this will be completed, okay? And then he gives us another time frame, and this is gonna be 400 and, help me, 34. Thank you, I was gonna do 43. 434 years. And what event is going to take place here? Which is going to be a total of 483 years. So from this decree to this point is 483 years. And what event is gonna take place here?
The anointed one will be put to
Yep.
death.
Okay, so Messiah the Prince, he will be on the earth at that point in time, which that number of days is April 6th, 32 AD. Okay? And then what happens, it says, after that time period, what's gonna happen? And you said it, Tessa. What's gonna happen?
They put him to death.
Yeah, so he's gonna be cut off. So that accounts for 483 years. And then we're given a covenant in verse 27, and that covenant is supposed to last how long?
7 years.
7 years. So now we've got our 490 years accounted for. And that what's gonna happen, and it says he will make a covenant with who?
Israel.
Yeah, the many, and
Yeah.
that's the right assumption, since we're talking about covenant, he's talking about your people, your city, and so he's giving them all this information, and so he's saying he's making a covenant. Some people believe this covenant will be what allows them to rebuild the temple. I don't know, we don't know, it's speculation, okay? But he's gonna do something with that covenant. What is he gonna do? What is he gonna do with that covenant?
Give him the sacrifice.
He is. He's going to put it into sacrifice. Sounds like Antiochus. And what else is he going to do?
He'll set up an abomination. that
Yep,
causes
there's another.
desolation.
And it might just be that he goes and takes his seat in the temple like Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians 2 tells us, and says, I'm God. Okay? But he also does something else. All this, we know this takes place when? When does that take place? We're told time in there.
3.5 years.
Yep, where do you get that?
In the middle of the 7.
Yep, there you go. He breaks the covenant. So he's again a sneaky guy. And people are thinking he's doing all these amazing things. And he's a sneaky guy, and he comes in and he breaks the covenant halfway through, and he does these same things like Antiochus IV Epiphanes did, but on a scale of destruction that will be beyond our comprehension. Okay? So this time period right here, and I think it's Luke 21:24. Would somebody check that for me? Jesus calls this time period the time of the Gentiles. We also know this is the church age. And we can look at Ephesians 3, and Paul will tell us that the church was a mystery to the Jews. They had no understanding of the church age. And so for them, and it's about your people, it's almost like this is cut out of the calendar because it's the church age, and Jesus calls it, did anybody see what?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the time of the Gentiles. And so at that point, and so it's like on God's calendar, this is what is happening now, this is the time we're living, but for a Jewish calendar, it would almost be like that time didn't exist. Does that make sense? It's a time gap.
Because it's not their age, essentially. is what
Yeah, it
you're
doesn't
saying.
apply to them. It's like he didn't ask about them, so God's not talking to them about the church, he's not talking to them about what's happening during that time frame. And remember too, they didn't have a nation during that time. Because when they get cut off, Messiah gets cut off, what happens? What happens in here?
They get dispersed. the
Yeah,
Jewish nation.
70 AD, Titus comes in, forces them out of their country. They don't have a country until May 1948. Okay? So that's that timeline. Now the rest of chapter 11 is going to give us a little bit of an idea of what this guy is going to be doing. And that's, yeah, go
What's
ahead.
the left of the timeline here?
Huh?
What's the left date or year of the timeline here?
445 BC.
I didn't see that part, I didn't read
Yeah,
that
sorry.
part. So I still think it could be argued though, that the rebuilding of the temple has to be the beginning of that 7-year period, because that's when they're completely a whole nation at that point, no? Or
No.
not?
You mean here, you're talking about the
Yeah,
rebuilding of
at
the temple?
you said, cause there's no indicator that that's the actual event that triggers the 7 years, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like that's the epitome of them
It could
coming
be.
together,
There's
is
a
them
peace,
rebuilding the temple.
a peace tree that allows them to rebuild their temple. It very well could be, but we don't know. We don't know, but it's an interesting thought. We just don't know, okay? So now we're gonna go through the last 10 verses, and that's pretty straightforward. We're gonna get a real sense of what this guy, Antichrist, future Antichrist, is gonna be about. And let's start with verse, we didn't read 36.
And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished. For what is decreed shall be done.
Okay, so do you remember, if we had time, and those cross references are bolded there, the mouthy horn, what was the mouthy horn doing? And you can see it over, huh?
Speaking blasphemy.
Yeah, blasphemies, that's exactly what he was doing. And then in Revelation 13:5 and 6, the beast is being boisterous and saying really bad things against God. And so we see these parallel characteristics to this verse. Notice what he's called when that verse starts. What is he called? He's called the king. All the way through, how have we had the king described?
King of the north, king of the south.
Exactly. So there's a change there. Okay, now it's important to notice, and that's why, another reason why they don't think this was fulfilled in history, can't match history. How does it match so precisely up until this point in time, and then all of a sudden you can't match history? But look at verse 40. And we'll read it again in just a minute. But it'll also show us something. What does verse 40 show us?
Then at the time of the end, the king of the south will attack the king of the north. The king of the north will storm out with chariots, charioteers, and a vast navy. He will invade various lands and sweep through them like a flood.
So, Lauren, yours says, at the time of the end, the king of the south will, what?
Attack the king of the north.
Okay, does anybody have anything different?
Will engage him in battle, and the king of the north will storm against him.
Okay, the king of the south is going to fight him, and who else is gonna fight him?
Is it both kings, the king of the south and the king of the north are fighting against him?
Exactly.
Who's
If,
him?
if, him
The
is the king is the Antichrist.
Oh.
But see here, we have the king of the north fighting him, we have the king of the south fighting him. If
See,
it
I
was
thought they-
Antiochus,
The north
who is Antiochus?
He was king of the north.
That's right. So how can he fight himself? So they've introduced the king. They're not associating him with north or south. But now when they're talking about it, he's engaging people in battle at this time, saying the king of the north is coming against him and the king of the south is coming against him. And it all supports the fact that this is still a future that has not occurred yet in our time. And remember, we saw a gap in time. And if you cross-reference to 23 with the mouthy horn in Daniel 7, we saw that, and I didn't put the verse there, but farther up it's like verse 7 where he describes the fourth kingdom, and then we see the horns, and then we see the transition of the mouthy horn, subduing 3 horns. So we see there's gaps in time, and that is absolutely consistent with each chapter. A gap in time here, a gap in time here in chapter 11. In chapter 2 on the statue, we're told that that Jesus will take out the statue when it hits, and where will the stone hit the statue? Do you remember? Feet and the toes. And so that's, Rome existed in history, it's got to exist in the future, so we're seeing that continual, consistent, there's a time gap here. And so we're getting Rome, a revived Roman Empire in those last, however, at this time period, okay? To pull off this covenant, some people think it'll be a Jew. You can kind of go, yeah, maybe that would be a possibility, yeah. Who else better to be sneaky with the Jews and be able to pull off a covenant with the Jews? Don't know. It's just some people's theories.
Or
Okay.
half Jew, half Muslim, how about that?
Maybe so. There you go. Somebody's gonna be mad at those parents.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back up and let's read 37 through 38. And let's kind of we'll get some understanding of what he's like here, that we don't get this picture anywhere else in the Bible.
He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors, or for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but he will exalt himself above them all. Instead of them, he will honor a god of fortresses, a god unknown to his ancestors. He will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts.
Okay, so what does that sound like? Idol worship.
He's gonna go.
What does he worship?
Himself.
Himself? And what else?
Money, I feel like.
Okay, there is money, but it's attached to something.
The god of fortresses.
Yeah, what is that?
A god his ancestors never knew.
War, I don't know.
Yes, that's exactly right. He is going to worship war, because what does war do?
Bring some money.
Brings power.
Power and money, both of those things.
Sounds like Hitler, doesn't it?
It does sound like Hitler, the way he took over Europe.
You know, you used the word earlier, foreshadow. And I just got to thinking about that. Antiochus is a foreshadow of the Antichrist. A foreshadow is just a little bitty bit of what's to come. And
Right.
look how bad Antiochus was.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's pretty sobering.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Antichrist is going to be exponentially more intense.
Okay, it's true. Okay, so he's also, if he's gonna do this, he's gonna have to, what is he gonna do? How does it describe his wealth? What does it say about his wealth?
He has gold, silver, precious jewels.
Yeah, he's got a big money chest. And he is going to, if he's gonna conquer the world, he's gonna have to have a really good money chest and an army, okay? So we see that's where this is coming into play for him. And it would be consistent with some of the descriptions in the end. All of the nations gather, which is not reference to Daniel. Where do the nations gather at the end? That valley.
Oh.
Armageddon.
Megiddo.
Yeah, Megiddo. Okay.
So, what is I'm trying to reconcile with this. Honor a god of fortresses, a god whom his fathers did not know. Like, what's I'm trying to reconcile, because we've got a lot of examples of those people, like, preceding him doing
That very
similar
thing.
things. So I'm trying to understand why that call out's in there.
I think it's because we're talking worldwide dominating dominion. And so in order to do that, he's gonna have to be extremely wealthy, and he's gonna have to accumulate power.
And we also have to know too, you said that earlier, you corrected me, that there has to be a peace treaty signed, so all these things have to happen at the exact same time, right?
Around the same
So
time.
that's why, yeah, it has to happen when that peace treaty is signed, when there's a false sense of peace for 3.5 years between the Jews and Muslims.
Does that make sense, Austin?
I think so. I expected it to be like, I don't know, went through several translations it's the same, every one of them, so it's not like, I don't know, I expected it to resonate differently in one of them, and it really hasn't, so.
And I think too, Austin, what we're doing, we got this. We can look at some things
Sure.
where overlap other places, but we have to be careful with this and go, it sounds like this, but we can't be dogmatic about it because we can't cross-reference repeatedly, like we know what's gonna break this is, the covenant in halfway through is the Antichrist is going into the temple, and he's gonna say, I'm God. We know that's what starts those last 3.5 years. Okay?
And he's not initiated that peace
Yeah.
in Israel.
Yeah.
He's not done that yet.
No, and so
That
we
person
can't,
doesn't
but it
exist,
sounds
so-
like, and that's what we kinda have to be open to, the things that it sounds like, okay? So let's look at verse 39, what do we find out there?
Claiming this foreign god's help, he will attack the strongest fortresses. He will honor those who submit to him, appointing them to positions of authority and dividing the land among them as their reward.
Okay, what does that sound like?
It sounds like Antiochus or whatever.
Yeah, it does, it sounds in that, like John just said, just a little speck compared to what this guy's gonna be doing. What is he gonna be doing with, what does it sound like he's doing?
He's buying loyalty.
Sounds like that. Strongest of he's gonna take action against the strongest of forces. If he's taking action against the strongest of forces, what does he think about himself? He's stronger. Exactly. And so he's got a lot of strength, he's accumulating strength and wealth and an army, and he's ready to take on the world. And it does remind me of Hitler, I thought of that too, World War II. That's the way he conquered Europe, and he also kept making deals with people, and then he'd break them. You know.
Another interesting point is pre-Hitler, the Israels were still scattered from that 78 time mark.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
essentially the fallout from Hitler was them gathering back home.
That is
It's
true.
very ironic.
It is, that is true. And it finally, so even though England had control of Palestine since World War I, they didn't have the world's support. A lot of people against the Jews. And so he didn't have the world's support. But after World War II, people were horrified that 6 million Jews were killed. And then there was worldwide sympathy to get them back into their land.
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
Do you know what the help of a foreign god is referring to?
Okay, so, no, but here's what I think. Remember when in Revelation 17, we talked about the woman that rides the beast? And we related that to a worldwide religion? And that then they're gonna destroy the worldwide religion, the 10 kings who are around at the same time as him, they're gonna turn on her and destroy her. So I kind of look at that going, interesting, or is it a worldwide religion? And that's what he's using to start to accumulate. He uses the religion, they support each other.
And
And
so what's interesting is, this just, like, in maybe another translation, it says help of a foreign god. But what it says here is claiming this foreign god's help, like relating it to 38. It's like saying the thing that's foreign is the God his ancestors never knew. The God of fortress, like I don't know, the way that this is written, it's relating it to the previous verse.
it does, but is that also, again, worldwide, we've never had on this earth one world religion. We've never had it.
It
It's-
also coincides
It's
with.
speculation, that's all we can do with
Yeah.
these verses is
I mean, that's what I
speculation.
say, like the God of fortresses in general. I guess what we're talking about here is whether there's a relationship between the foreign God and the God of fortresses, but I think like, in general it's not real clear what that is.
It is, that's right. We can have some speculation, but we certainly know he's still talking about military might, military power in these verses. What were you gonna say, Tony?
I don't remember.
Okay.
It wasn't important.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking that it's the Antichrist,
Uh-huh,
and he's being held by Satan this whole time anyway. so-
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And everything's at his feet. So he's gonna reward those who worship him, honor him, and express loyalty to them, and he's gonna give people wealth. Okay, so let's look at verse 40 through 42. text from the church during Bible study. Isn't that wrong?
Yes, we all did.
Yeah, we all did.
Every context, didn't we?
Okay, they're disrupting my class. Go ahead. Somebody read 40 through 42.
Then at the time of the end, the king of the south, did I just read?
Yeah, we're repeating that.
Okay.
It's okay.
Then at the time of the end, the king of the south will attack the king of the north. The king of the north will storm out with chariots, charioteers, and a vast navy. He will invade various lands and sweep through them like a flood. He will enter the glorious land of Israel, and many nations will fall, but Moab, Edom, and the best part of Ammon will escape. He will conquer many countries, and even Egypt will not escape.
Okay, so he does mention, so we could look at where those countries are historically and then where they are now, that somehow, for some reason, he's not gonna conquer those. And that we just know that, but he is going to be successful, right? Isn't that what you just read? He's going to be able to conquer, and he's going to be successful. And so as he conquers, what is he gonna be doing?
Possessing.
Yeah, he's, yeah, gaining more wealth, more territory, and subduing more people, more nations, okay? Some nations will be rescued, and he will meet with resistance from the king of the north and the king of the south. Now, whether it's truly the king of the north and the king of the south, like what we've been looking at for all those verses in chapter 11, is it Syria and Egypt? We don't know. Egypt is mentioned in here by name, but we don't know. Is it Russia? Some people think it's Russia that's the king of the north. But we're going to see in just a minute who's ever living at that time is going to know. Okay? All right, so let's read 43, and what will we find out about him?
Sorry.
You're good.
I don't know if you ever looked at the Message translation, but I was looking at these because I was just really curious to see how the different, and I think it kind of lumps all these together, so I don't know exactly where I'm starting here, but it's like in 37, I think. It says, he'll even stoop to despising the God of the holy ones, and in the place where God is worshipped, he will put on exhibit with a lavish show of silver and gold and jewels, a new God that no one has ever heard of. Marching under the banner of a strange God, he will attack the key fortresses. Then he says, he will promote everyone who falls in line behind this God, putting them in positions of power, paying off the grants of land. That does really sound like a world religion, like that he creates.
Yeah, it does. And then he substitutes himself for it all. We know that happens because we're told that. He substitutes whatever it is that's uniting people, he substitutes it with himself. I'm God. And then he has the false prophet who's also saying, he's God, worship him. Okay? So let's look at 43. What do we find out in 43?
He will gain control of the treasures of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt with the Libyans and the Cushites in submission.
Okay, so as far as Egypt, he's going to get what? What is he going to get from Egypt? Wealth. Whether that's truly the country, I think, why would he say Egypt if it's not? And Egypt still exists today. So, or is it, but so he's going to gain more wealth from Egypt, but we're also going to see what's going to happen with some other countries. How are they going to respond to him? Yeah, they're gonna
join in.
Yeah, they're gonna follow
we're
his
good.
lead. Yeah, they're gonna, because he's gonna be that strong that he's gonna be able to kind of do what he wants to do, and that's exactly what we're told in Daniel. It's exactly what we're told in Revelation. He's gonna do as he pleases, and that's what he's doing around in the world. Okay, and then let's read 44. What do we see in 44?
But reports from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate many.
Okay, so there must be somebody's rising up, gonna go against him, and he's going after him. And it sounds like that. And then let's look at 45. What do we see there?
He will pitch his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end, and no one will help him.
How does he end?
By himself.
That's great.
How does he end? What are we told? He'll come to his end. How?
None to help.
None to help him. And that is consistent with Daniel 9:20. So one who is decreed is poured out on the one that makes desolate. And it's consistent with, at that point in time, the God of heaven is going to set up his eternal kingdom. And so we see that same thing across the board, wherever this guy is talked about, he comes to an end because that's when Jesus comes back. That's what stops him. 3.5 years after he breaks that covenant.
So that would also be why no one helps them too, because they see Christ and it's like, it's over?
Well, remember, it's the appointed time.
Yeah.
But so because he is snatched and he's thrown into the lake of fire. So God puts an end to him. That he stops the time.
Okay.
And so each time, no, it's not, a person's not mentioned, he'll come to his end, okay? A lot of people think that he's gonna pitch his tent between the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea and the Temple Mount, somewhere there. He's gonna be living there. They have massive army, okay? So then let's turn to 12:1, and we're almost done. Sorry, we'll get this done here in just a minute. Let's read 12:1 through 3.
At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt.
Okay, he's saying at that time. What time is he referring to?
Tribulation.
Second coming.
No, he's actually, remember the verses, they put the chapter break in there? So it's just like you're reading about the Antichrist doing his thing. Camps there in, yeah, he camps there in Israel, and then it says at that time. So he's camped out in Israel, Michael stands up. Why does he stand up?
Because he's the protector of Israel.
He's the protector of Israel, and what would be what would the sense of standing?
You're ready to vote?
Yeah, he's getting ready to fight because what's coming? What does it say that's coming?
Time of trouble such as never been seen.
So now we know all of that has to do with breaking that covenant. He's sitting there, he's got his army there, the covenant is broken, and there's a time, Jesus said, there's a time of distress like nobody's ever seen. He just said that too. So Michael's rising up because he's the protector of his people, the Jews. And he's in that alert position.
So real quick, so what he is doing, when he's doing the protecting, is those pockets, the ones who escape and flee, are those who he is protecting then?
That's a good question. It very well could be.
Because the Holy Spirit has been removed, that's
Right.
when things become crazy.
Right. Right. And I really think when we talked about Revelation 12, there's a war in heaven. Michael and his angels have a war with Satan and his angels, and he's thrown down to earth, and he has a short time. How much time does he have? Do you remember? 3.5 years. We're having 3.5 years. Michael's standing. And so there's that spiritual realm of events taking place, and then there's things taking place on earth at the same time. And we've got the Antichrist in Israel. And 2 Thessalonians, Paul says when you see him standing, he's going to take his seat in the temple and say, I'm God. Jesus says when you see him there, get out of here. Because there's going to be 3.5 years of this. He doesn't say 3.5 years, Revelation does. Okay? All right, who's going to be rescued?
Israel.
Everyone.
Whose name is written in the book.
Yep. That's consistent through the Bible. Jew, Gentile. And I skipped over Jeremiah 37. That's where he says it's a time of distress for this is a time of Jacob's trouble. And then Zechariah 13:8 is where it says 2/3 of Israel will die. 1/3 will survive the tribulation. Okay? What happens to those who have died? And it's consistent with the New Testament teaching. Yes. And they're going to await to what?
Their eternal life or eternal damnation.
Yes. That's consistent, Old Testament, New Testament teaching. Let's read 12:4.
But you, Daniel, keep this prophecy a secret, seal up the book until the time of the end. when many will rush here and there, and knowledge will increase.
So what is Daniel told to do after he wrote these chapters, experienced these visions, interpreted visions, lived all of his life in captivity? What is he told to do?
Keep it a secret.
And why?
Till the end, then many will, increase their knowledge, but how are they gonna increase their knowledge at the end?
Well, knowledge is increased. Okay, we have this information. We have a better understanding than Daniel had because we have history. We also have an understanding of the future. And when these events start to take place, those people that know his word and see those events are going to know exactly what's going on. And that's what he's saying. This isn't your time. You were the person that wrote it down, but this is not for you and it's not for your time. Okay? So let's read 5 through 7.
Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river and one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. Then the power of the holy people has been finally broken, and all these things will be completed.
Okay, so the man dressed in linen is the guy that he saw at the beginning of chapter 10, and now he's there, and another angel is there, and he's asking more questions. And he wants to know again, how long is this going to last? And he's told what we've heard repeated through what John saw and what Daniel saw, which is those 3.5 years. And then the power of the holy people will be shattered, and the events will be completed. Okay? Let's read 12, 8 through 10.
I heard, but I did not understand, so I asked my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? He replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand.
So again, we have those two categories of people. Some will know what's going on because they know the truth, and some won't understand what's going on, and they'll continue to be wicked. And then let's read verse 11. What do we see there? And 12.
And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate set up, there shall be 1290 days.
Okay, and then the 12.
Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days.
We have nothing to compare those dates to. It's all speculation. Is it Jesus' second coming? People are judged that are on the earth, and that those are key dates potentially. We don't know. We have nothing to compare those dates to, but they're going to mean something, and we just don't know what those are. And then how is the book close?
As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance.
Okay, so his purpose was his purpose. And he didn't get all his questions answered, and it didn't pertain to him or to his time. And we in our time have a much better, clearer understanding. We have history, a lot of this book is history. And we also have the parts of the book that are still future. And we can see, since Israel has been in its land, and since the computer age has been ushered in, that any of these events are possible in our time, in our lifetime, or beyond.
So
Yeah.
who resurrected this information?
The book of Daniel?
Yes.
There's always a copy, but what's interesting is the most copies they ever found was, where was it in the desert where they found those copies of the Bible?
Dead Sea Scrolls?
Dead Sea Scrolls. found the most copies with the Dead Sea Scrolls in that they had in possession up until that point in time. So I mean, it's just the same thing. They preserved these Old Testament, because these were known spokesmen. A lot of them were known spokesmen for God, as well as the history of the nation of Israel.
Did Jesus reference Daniel when he's speaking directly to the Pharisees at any point in the New Testament?
He just did in general when he said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken through Daniel the prophet, let the reader understand, get out of Dodge. The great tribulation is coming.
So Jews at that time, so even at the oldest manuscripts, the Dead Sea Scrolls, I forget what those are dated to, but the Jews at the time would have been familiar with that, because he was quoting Daniel there.
Yes.
So
They would have been familiar with him, and he's quoting Daniel, so he's familiar, and, I did wanna, if you have to go, you can go, I just wanted, if you can stay, you can stay, I just wanted to play this song, I think it's a fitting end for the class.
One last question.
Yes, you sure can.
So where it says the 1,290 days and the 1,335 days, that's like 45 days difference. We have like no idea, no nothing, no,
The
just something
only
for 45 days.
Yeah, the only speculation people are coming up with, there's gonna be people, when Jesus returns on his second coming, there's people on the earth. And that he's gonna, and that's where he's gonna divide, some are gonna be believers, some people will come through the tribulation being a believer.
still
And,
alive.
and still alive, and that may be, some of that may be tied to that judgment, the separation and judgment, it may be setting up his millennial kingdom on earth. We're not given those days to cross-reference to anything else, but he says it. And as he said, the other days that we can cross-reference is pretty specific, so he knows, and we don't. Oh no, let's play another song after it.
You just wanna keep it going, don't you?
Right? Couple and all-nighter. Okay. Well, I'm afraid. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today, and thank you for an opportunity to study Daniel together. Thank you for this class and for each person who's been in it, and for their contribution to this class, and what a sense of encouragement that they have brought to me personally, and I'm really thankful for that, and the opportunity to be here doing this with them. And Father, you know each person, you know each person's needs and concerns and challenges, and Father, I just pray that you would work in those, and I pray also that you would give us the perspective that comes from this study, and that we have an eye on heaven and an eye on that day, and that it would affect who we are as we wait for that day to come. Thank you so much for who you are, and that you have loved us, that you came here and saw our need and you died for us. And Father, we just pray that we would be mindful of that, and that you would continue to grow us and create greater intimacy with you. And thank you so much for this fellowship of people. And thank you that we've been able to just grow closer to each other as well. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, I'm impressed, you guys, because it's a hard thing to stick through, and there's so much. So anyway, I just appreciate everything that you guys contributed. Yes, John, you are the only one that ever has to raise your hand. Thank you for remembering.
When you finish talking.
Go ahead.
I get a verse of the day from a site called Bible Gateway. Was ironic is today's verse was 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. then we who are alive will remain, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. And I read, after reading that, I read chapter 5. And that was Paul writing to the people in Thessalonica, because he just did a real short term there. You know, he got kicked out, and he wrote the book of Thessalonians from Corinth. And just to reaffirm to them, and they were not sure about the second coming and everything. And he, without reading all of chapter 5, what he's saying there is basically, you're not going to understand it all, but you are different. You know it's coming. And, you know, just be aware and keep your eye on it. And that's what's happened with us for this whole 9 months.
And me too, John, me too. I'm just very thankful. I'm just thankful for all of you and those people that couldn't be here tonight. It's one other time in my life I've been able to teach in a setting where I feel like people care about each other and can relate, and we can talk about the Bible and get to know each other better by talking about the Bible and care about each other while we talk about the Bible. And it's pretty amazing, and what God has done in here has been organic. God has done it, and I just am very thankful, and I'm thankful to be able to participate in this with you. And I need a break, but I will miss not meeting. Huh?
Understand.
Yeah, I will miss not meeting. Donnie counted our hours on just this one, and we put 30 hours into doing this one.
So what if you need a break? You've
Right.
been needing a break
Right.
for 2 years.
Exactly.
And you
I have no
that-
idea what this year was gonna hold, sure, Joe. Only John has to raise his
I'm
hand.
following John's lead
Okay,
here.
okay.
So with all that being said, what's next?
I don't know yet, Joe, I don't know yet. When I know, I'll email everybody, and, we'll do something starting in late
Okay,
August,
let me
early September. Okay.
rephrase the question.
Yes, sir,
Are we gonna stay together as a group?
I want to.
Okay.
You show up, I'll show up.
Okay, cause we've already, our one group's already disbanded on us.
No,
so-
we're not. Yeah,
Yeah,
what's been interesting is we've lost some people every time and we've gained some people every time. That's just, but you know, we just trust God with that, these people only needed that, and then they were gonna do something else. I hope we always stay together, I do, and that's my intention,
I just wasn't sure how it
Huh?
worked. I just wasn't
Okay.
sure on how it worked with the groups.
I intended to teach the very first class 3 years ago on suffering and be done. That was my intention,
And yet you're still here.
and I'm still here, yeah.
3 years ago, Janet?
No, but it's just, I feel like, in this class, I feel like I'm sitting in a chair like you, because that's how it feels for me. It feels like we're just friends studying God's Word together, and I really am thankful for that. And it has got me through this year, very tough year, it has got me through this year. So I'm great, and you know, everybody, when you show up, you showed up, so I knew I had to, and I had to prepare. So that's what's cool about it. I'm thankful for all of you, and what God continues to do as we get together.
We just didn't want anybody to take our seats.
You got your seat. No. But I'm glad you asked. I just don't know what we're gonna do, but when I do know, I will email you, and we'll email you with the start date. Or when we get together, we're gonna get together in June, we'll get together in July and hang out together, and then we'll eat when we first start, and then we'll start. And, but we'll do something in the fall and, you know, something in the spring. But thank you so much. You guys have blessed me.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.